My dad and I were always close, especially after Mom died. I worked so hard for years to save enough for my own place. When I finally bought that apartment in downtown Boston, it felt like my biggest achievement. My dad seemed proud too, though my sister Amanda always got special treatment. Then came that call. "Clay, I sold your apartment to Amanda," Dad said casually, like he was telling me about the weather. I couldn't believe my ears. Before I tell you how I discovered my apartment was secretly sold to my sister, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had family. Take advantage of your kindness. Growing up in Boston without a mom shaped me in ways I never expected. When she died of cancer, when I was 14, our family dynamic changed forever. My father, Thomas, suddenly found himself raising 2 kids alone, me and my sister Amanda, who was 3 years younger. Looking back now, the pattern was clear, but as a kid, I just accepted it as normal. Amanda got the new clothes, the expensive summer camps, the latest phone. Dad always had a reason. "She takes after your mother. She needs more support than you do, Clay." "You understand, right, son? I learned to fend for myself early." While my sister got everything handed to her, I delivered newspapers before school, starting at 15. By 16, I was working weekends at a local hardware store. When college applications came around, Dad sat with Amanda for hours perfecting her essays. "Mine, you got this, Clay. You're the smart one." What he really meant was I was on my own. When acceptance letters arrived, Dad drained his savings to send Amanda to a private university out of state. For me, it was community college and student loans. "You're more independent," he explained. "Amanda needs the experience of being away." The pattern continued. She got a car for her 20th birthday. I took the bus. Every Christmas, her pile of presents towered over mine. I moved out at 18, renting a tiny room in a house with 4 other students. Dad seemed almost relieved to have one less child to worry about. "You're my rock, Clay," he'd say when I'd visit. "I never have to worry about you." It wasn't a compliment. It was permission to neglect me while continuing to cater to Amanda's every need. Despite everything, I loved my dad. I understood losing Mom had broken something in him, and somehow spoiling Amanda was his way of keeping Mom's memory alive. But understanding doesn't stop the hurt. It just helps you carry it better. Throughout college, I worked myself to exhaustion. While friends partied, I juggled 3 jobs: barista mornings campus library, afternoons, and weekend shifts at a warehouse. Every dollar went into savings minus bare necessities. Vacations none, new clothes, thrift stores only. My car was 15 years old and broke down weekly. Lunch was peanut butter sandwiches, dinner, often just rice and beans. For 5 years after graduation, I maintained this Spartan existence. My engineering job paid decent money, but I lived like I was broke. Coworkers invited me to happy hours, ski trips, summer shares on the beach. I declined them all. "I'm saving for something important." I'd explain, though, few understood the depth of my determination. At 27, I finally had enough for a down payment. The real estate agent showed me 15 places before I found it. A 1-bedroom apartment in downtown Boston, small but perfect, with huge windows and a partial view of the harbor. When I signed those papers, I felt a pride I'd never known before. This was mine, earned through countless sacrifices and thousands of hours of hard work. I invited my family for a small housewarming party. Dad looked around, nodding with what seemed like approval, though he couldn't help adding, "Pretty expensive for such a small place. Renting would be cheaper, you know." Amanda walked through my new home with a strange expression. "Must be nice," she said, "to have everything figured out." I ignored the bitter edge in her voice. This was my moment, and for once, I wasn't going to let family dynamics spoil it. That first night alone in my apartment, I sat on my newly purchased couch and felt for the first time truly independent. No roommates, no landlord, no dad comparing me to my sister. Just my own space bought with my own money. I slept better that night than I had in years. It was a typical Sunday when everything fell apart. I was making coffee, planning a lazy day of watching football and ordering takeout when Dad called. We chatted about nothing important, his golf game, my work project, the weather. Then he dropped it casually, like he was mentioning picking up milk from the store. I have good news, Clay. Amanda's moving back to Boston next month. She's going through that divorce, and with little Jack, she needs family support. That's great, I said, genuinely happy my sister would be closer. I can help with Jack when she needs a break. That's the thing, Dad continued, his voice suddenly tight. I sold your apartment to Amanda. She needs it more than you do right now. With the divorce and the baby, she needs stability. You understand? I nearly dropped my coffee mug. You did what I sold your apartment to Amanda, he repeated slower this time, like I was having trouble with the English language rather than the outrageous statement. She needs a fresh start, and your place is perfect for her and Jack. Dad, that's not possible. You can't sell something that doesn't belong to you. He sighed, that familiar sound of disappointment. Clay, I'm your father. I helped you with the paperwork when you bought it, remember? My name is on those documents too. That wasn't true. I'd done everything myself. Dad had only come to the final signing as moral support. But before I could argue, he continued, Amanda needs this, Clay. She's going through a terrible time. You're successful, stable. You can buy another place. Your sister has nothing right now. The conversation devolved into a heated argument. I shouted. Dad got defensive. I demanded to know how he thought he had the right to sell my property. He accused me of being selfish, of never considering anyone but myself. The call ended with him saying, I thought you'd be a bigger person about this. I'm disappointed in you, Clay. Those words cut deep, as they always had. Even as an adult who had accomplished so much on my own, my father's disappointment still had the power to wound me. I hung up hands, shaking mind, racing. How could this be happening? Was it even legally possible? That night, sleep was impossible. I tossed and turned, replaying the conversation with my father. Each time I remembered his casual, I sold your apartment, my heart raced with renewed anger and disbelief. I tried calling Amanda multiple times, but she sent me to voicemail. Her text responses were vague and evasive. Dad said he'd handle everything. I thought you knew. Can we talk about this later? The stress manifested physically. My stomach twisted in knots. I couldn't eat. Twice I woke, gasping from nightmares about being homeless. Monday morning I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I couldn't focus on anything but this betrayal. My best friend Ryan came over after I texted him what happened. He found me pacing the apartment that apparently wasn't mine anymore. This can't be legal, Ryan said, watching me wear a path in the carpet. Your dad can't just sell your apartment without your consent. He seemed so certain, I replied. What if I missed something in the paperwork? What if he did co-sign something? Ryan grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to stop pacing. Clay, listen to yourself. You're the most meticulous person I know. You read every contract 3 times. There's no way you missed your father having co-ownership of your apartment. His certainty helped, but still doubt gnawed at me. What if Dad was right? What if I really was being selfish? Amanda was going through a divorce with a 3-year-old son. Compared to her, my life was stable. But then, I thought about those 5 years of sacrifice. The vacations declined, the threadbare clothes, the 100-hour work weeks, all to buy this apartment that my father was giving away without even asking me. You need to talk to your mortgage lender, Ryan suggested. They'll know exactly whose name is on the deed. That advice pulled me back from the brink. Instead of drowning in emotion, I could take action. I called my mortgage company immediately and scheduled a meeting for that afternoon. The loan officer, Mrs. Patel, listened to my story with growing concern. She pulled up my file, studied it, then looked at me directly. Mr. Walker, according to our records, you are still the legal owner of the property on Beacon Street. The mortgage is solely in your name, as is the deed. There have been no transfers of ownership, legal or otherwise. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by confusion. So my father couldn't have sold the apartment. Absolutely not, Mrs. Patel said firmly. Not without your signature on multiple legal documents. Has anyone asked you to sign anything recently? No, I replied. Nothing. She frowned. Then legally, no sale has occurred. Whatever your father told you, he has no right to sell your property. No one does. I left the meeting with copies of my mortgage documents and deed, all confirming my sole ownership. The relief was enormous, but it raised disturbing questions. If Dad couldn't legally sell my apartment, what exactly was going on? I drove straight to my apartment, half expecting to find it empty or with strangers inside. Instead, I found something worse. Amanda's car, in my designated parking space. Using my key, I entered to find moving boxes stacked in the living room and my sister arranging books on my shelf. "Amanda, what are you doing here?" I demanded. She turned surprised, but not apologetic. "Clay, Dad didn't tell me you were coming by." I'm still getting settled. Getting settled. In my apartment, her expression hardened. "Dad told me he worked everything out with you. He told me he sold my apartment to you," I countered, "which he legally can't do." Amanda's face flushed. "Look, I didn't ask for any of this, okay? Dad offered to help me after Patrick left. He said you had agreed to sell." "Well, I didn't," I snapped. "And this is still legally my apartment." What followed was a bitter argument where the truth emerged in painful fragments. Dad had given Amanda keys and verbal permission to move in. He promised to handle the paperwork with me later. The plan apparently was to present me with a fait accompli and count on family pressure to make me comply. "You've always had it easy, Clay," Amanda said, tears welling in her eyes. "Everything just works out for you. You have a great job, this beautiful apartment." What do I have? A failed marriage, a 3-year-old who cries for his dad, and nowhere to go. So that justifies taking my home. "Something I worked years for," Dad said. "You never help the family," she countered. "That you're selfish with your money and success." That accusation stung worse than anything. After a lifetime of self-sufficiency, of never asking Dad for anything, he was painting me as the selfish one. Amanda started crying, talking about little Jack and how scared she was about their future. For a moment, my resolve wavered. Maybe I should just help her. Maybe I was being selfish. I left confused and angry, but with a growing suspicion that I was being manipulated. Something wasn't adding up in this story. Why didn't Dad just ask me for help? Why this elaborate deception? 2 days later, Mrs. Patel from the mortgage company called me. "Mr. Walker, I wanted to alert you to something concerning. Someone attempted to file a transfer of deed on your property yesterday. The paperwork was rejected because the signature didn't match our records." My blood ran cold. "Someone tried to forge my signature." "It appears so," she said gravely. "I would recommend consulting with an attorney immediately. This is potentially fraudulent activity." That call changed everything. This wasn't just family drama anymore. Someone, almost certainly my father, had attempted to commit fraud using my name. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. Later that day, I discovered text messages between my father and sister from weeks earlier, planning how they would handle me once I discovered their plan. "Clay always gives in when pressured," Dad wrote. "He won't fight it once you're moved in." They'd been counting on my lifetime pattern of capitulation, of putting family harmony above my own needs, of being the reasonable one who would sacrifice without complaint. Not this time. That night marked my absolute breaking point. Seeing those text messages, the calculated way my father and sister had planned to exploit my good nature, something broke inside me. I sat alone in my apartment, the one they tried to steal, and felt a lifetime of compliance and appeasement crumble away. Ryan came over with takeout and found me staring blankly at those messages. They knew exactly what they were doing. I told him, my voice hollow. They've been planning this for weeks. Ryan read through the exchanges and shook his head in disgust. They never expected you to stand up for yourself. I never have. Before I admitted. Every time Dad asked me to be the bigger person, I did it. Every time Amanda needed something, I stepped aside. Not because I wanted to, but because it was easier than fighting. And they counted on that, Ryan said, placing a container of food in front of me. They thought they knew exactly how you'd react. The next morning, I met with Mrs. Patel again. She showed me the fraudulent transfer documents. The signature was a poor imitation of mine, but it was clearly an attempt to forge my name. When I asked what my options were, her answer was unequivocal. This is potentially criminal, Mr. Walker. You need a lawyer. She recommended Jessica Williams, an attorney specializing in property law. I called from the bank's parking lot and got an appointment that afternoon. Jessica's office was small, but immaculate. She listened to my story without interruption, occasionally making notes. When I finished, she leaned forward. Mr. Walker, what your father attempted is fraud. What your sister is doing is unlawful occupancy. You have every legal right to reclaim your property immediately. Their family, I said weakly. The lifetime habit of making excuses for them still strong. Family who tried to steal your home, Jessica replied firmly. Family who attempted to commit fraud in your name. Family who are currently trespassing in your legal residence. Would you accept this behavior from anyone else? Put that way, the answer was obvious. No, I wouldn't. And for the first time, I asked myself why I had accepted such treatment from the people who should have supported me most. What do? I asked. We have several options, Jessica explained. I recommend we start with a formal cease and desist notice documenting the unauthorized occupation. We'll get an official statement of ownership from your mortgage company. Then we request police presence for when you reclaim your property. This prevents confrontation and establishes an official record. My stomach nodded at the thought of police involvement. Is that really necessary, Mr. Walker? Your family has shown they're willing to break the law to take what's yours. I strongly advise having official witnesses when you reclaim your property. The decision to take legal action against my own family was the hardest I'd ever made. Every instinct built over a lifetime screamed to back down, to be the peacemaker, to sacrifice my needs for family harmony. But as Jessica laid out the steps, a new feeling emerged, the righteous anger of someone who had been wronged and was finally standing up for themselves. Your father and sister chose this path, Jessica reminded me, not you. They created this situation when they decided to take what wasn't theirs to take. By the end of our meeting, we had a plan. Jessica would prepare all necessary legal documentation. I would document everything. The fraudulent signature, the text messages, Amanda's unauthorized occupancy. We changed the locks and security system once the apartment was reclaimed. And most importantly, we'd establish clear legal consequences if my family attempted anything similar in the future. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a sense of control returning. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't obligated to let my family take advantage of me. I had rights, and I was going to exercise them. The cease and desist notice was delivered to both my father and sister the next day. Dad called immediately, alternating between threats and emotional manipulation. You're breaking your sister's heart, he raged. After everything I've done for you, I remained calm. A new experience when dealing with my father's anger. You attempted to forge my signature, Dad. You tried to steal my home. There's no justification for that. I was helping your sister, he shouted. Something you've never bothered to do. You could have asked me for help, I replied. Instead, you chose to commit fraud. The call ended with him threatening to disown me. Once that would have devastated me. Now I found myself wondering if being free of his manipulation might actually be a relief. The day of reclamation arrived. Jessica met me near my apartment with a notarized statement from the mortgage company confirming my sole ownership. Two police officers joined us, reviewing the documentation and understanding the situation. "We're not here to make arrests," the senior officer explained, "just to keep the peace and witness the legal owner reclaiming their property." Walking to my apartment door with this group felt surreal. I used my key, half expecting to find the locks changed, but it opened smoothly. Amanda was inside feeding little Jack breakfast. Her eyes widened, seeing me with police and an attorney. "What is this?" she demanded, reaching for her phone. "I'm calling Dad, Miss Walker." Jessica stepped forward. "Your brother is the legal owner of this property. You are occupying it without permission. These officers are here to witness Mr. Walker reclaiming his legal residence." Amanda's face crumpled. "But Dad said—" "Your father has no legal right to this apartment," Jessica continued. "I have documentation confirming Mr. Walker's sole ownership. You need to gather your belongings and vacate the premises." "Where am I supposed to go?" Amanda cried, clutching Jack to her chest. I felt a pang of sympathy, especially for my nephew, but held firm. "You should ask Dad that question. He put you in this position by lying to both of us." While the police stood by, Amanda frantically packed essentials for herself and Jack. She alternated between tears and angry phone calls to our father, who apparently wasn't answering. Through it all, I maintained a calm I didn't know I possessed. This wasn't about punishing Amanda. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine. 3 hours later, Amanda loaded the last bag into her car. Jack was strapped into his car seat, confused and upset by the tension. Before leaving, my sister turned to me. "I really thought Dad had worked this out with you," she said, voice small. "He promised me. He lied to both of us," I replied. "He had no right to offer you my home." As I watched them drive away, my feelings were mixed. There was victory, yes, but also a hollowness. This wasn't how family should treat each other. This wasn't how I wanted things to be. But for once, I had stood firm against being exploited, and that knowledge brought its own satisfaction. Back in my apartment, surrounded by the boxes Amanda had started unpacking, I felt both victorious and drained. Jessica assured me we'd taken all necessary legal steps to prevent future attempts. The locks would be changed that afternoon. The security system upgraded the next day. My home was mine again, secured by more than just trust. But the real victory was inside me. For the first time in my life, I had refused to be the family doormat. I had defended my boundaries and stood up for myself. The cost was high. My relationship with my father and sister might never be the same. But the alternative was continuing a lifetime pattern of being taken advantage of, and that price had finally become too high to pay. The weeks following the reclamation of my apartment were some of the hardest of my life. Dad launched a campaign of emotional warfare, angry calls, tearful voicemails, even enlisting extended family to pressure me. Aunts and uncles I rarely heard from suddenly called with concerns about the family rift. "Your father's devastated," my Aunt Susan told me. "He was only trying to help your sister. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive him?" What struck me was how none of them acknowledged the fundamental wrong that had been committed. In their view, Dad's intentions justified his actions, and my refusal to comply made me the villain. "He tried to steal my home," I would explain calmly. "He attempted to forge my signature on legal documents. Would you forgive that so easily?" The conversations usually ended awkwardly with promises to pray for our family healing. I started screening calls, responding only to texts, creating the distance I needed to stay firm in my resolve. Amanda's approach was different. After the initial shock wore off, she sent a long text apologizing, not for trying to take my apartment, but for how everything happened. She still believed she deserved my help, just not the way Dad had gone about it. "I really am struggling," she wrote. "Patrick left me with nothing. I thought Dad had worked it out with you." I responded with more compassion than I felt. "I'm sorry you're going through this. I would have helped if you'd asked. But trying to take my home wasn't the way." Dad predictably refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing. In his reality, he was the devoted father trying to help his daughter, while I was the selfish son, refusing to support family. He threatened to cut me from his will, to never speak to me again, to tell everyone what a terrible son I was. Each threat hurt, but also confirmed I'd made the right decision in establishing boundaries. Through it all, I stayed firm. Jessica had advised me to document every communication, which created an emotional distance that helped. Instead of getting pulled into the drama, I could view each interaction as evidence of the dysfunctional patterns I was trying to break. The apartment that had been my proudest achievement now felt like a fortress. I changed the locks immediately, installed a security system with cameras, even added a doorbell camera that sent alerts to my phone. These measures weren't just practical, they were symbolic of the boundaries I was establishing in my life. I redecorated, replacing the neutral colors I'd chosen to please everyone with bold blues and greens that I loved. I rearranged furniture, hung art that spoke to me, made the space unmistakably mine. Each change was an affirmation. This is my home, my life, my choice. Friends became my support system. Ryan checked on me daily. Coworkers who'd heard fragments of the story invited me for dinners, hikes, game nights, filling my calendar with positive interactions to balance the family stress. For perhaps the first time, I fully appreciated the chosen family we build as adults, people who respect our boundaries and support our growth. 3 months after the confrontation, I started seeing a therapist. Dr. Levine helped me recognize the family patterns that had shaped me. How I'd been cast as the responsible one who never needed help, while Amanda was the fragile one requiring constant support. How Dad's favoritism had trained me to earn love through sacrifice and compliance. What you did wasn't just about an apartment, Dr. Levine observed during one session. It was about claiming your right to be treated with respect. That framing helped me navigate the lingering guilt. I wasn't being selfish. I was requiring the same respect any human deserves. I wasn't abandoning family. I was establishing the conditions under which family relationships could be healthy. 6 months passed. The acute crisis faded into a new normal. Dad and I spoke occasionally, brief, surface-level conversations. Amanda found a small apartment with help from a divorce settlement. We exchanged texts about Jack cautiously rebuilding some semblance of siblinghood. The breakthrough with Dad came unexpectedly. My Uncle Jim, his older brother, visited from Chicago and apparently had some blunt conversations with him. Dad called one evening, his voice lacking its usual defensive edge. Jim helped me see some things he admitted grudgingly. About how I've treated you compared to your sister. It wasn't a full apology, but for my father it was seismic. He acknowledged that what he'd done was wrong, that he'd had no right to offer my property to Amanda. He didn't use the word sorry, but he did say he wanted to fix things between us. I need time, I told him honestly. I'm glad you see things differently now, but trust takes time to rebuild. He accepted that answer without argument. Another first. Our relationship began a slow thaw, not returning to what it was, but evolving into something potentially healthier. We started meeting for monthly dinners on neutral ground, restaurants where we could talk as adults without the baggage of childhood roles. Amanda's journey was different, but equally important. The collapse of Dad's plan forced her to find her own solutions rather than waiting for rescue. She got a job arranged. Childcare started building an independent life. When we finally had coffee together, I saw a new resilience in her. I was so angry at you, she admitted. But now I think losing that apartment was the best thing that could have happened to me. I needed to stand on my own 2 feet. We weren't close, not yet, but we were relating as adults rather than falling into childhood patterns. She no longer expected me to sacrifice for her, and I no longer resented her for our father's favoritism. Small steps, but in the right direction. The apartment that had been the center of so much conflict transformed in meaning. It was no longer just a symbol of my independence from renting, but of my independence from unhealthy family dynamics. Every time I unlocked the door, I remembered that I had fought for this space. Not just the physical apartment, but the right to set boundaries in my life. A year after the confrontation, I hosted Thanksgiving. Dad came. Amanda and Jack came. It was awkward at times, but also marked by moments of genuine connection. When Dad raised a toast to family, I added, and to respect, meeting his eyes directly. He nodded, understanding the message. Looking back now, I realize that standing up for myself didn't destroy my family. It created the possibility of a healthier one. By refusing to play my assigned role, I forced everyone to relate to me differently. The old patterns couldn't continue without my compliance. The most profound change wasn't in my family, though, but in me. I stopped seeking approval through sacrifice. I learned to state my needs clearly. I discovered that real love doesn't require the abandonment of self-respect. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to draw a line and say no more. It isn't selfish to require respect. It isn't cruel to establish boundaries. Sometimes, it's the only way to create relationships worth having. Have you ever had to stand up to family who took advantage of your kindness? How did you handle it? Share your experience in the comments below.